Welcome to the Chic Show. Today I have some fun Christmas crafts for you. Today I'm creating the coziest DIY Christmas decor for my home, all on a budget. Today's playlist is called Hello Christmas, hosted by Krista's Crafty Life and Rustic and Lace DIY. For project number one, I'm using this engineering book that I thrifted. The copyright is 1951. I loved the cover of it, the color, the fabric, everything. So I thought it would be perfect for a Christmas book. So I'm using this rub-on transfer from Candy Cane Cottage by IOD from last year. And IOD is coming out with their Christmas release October 1st. So be sure you check that out. So I'm just using my transfer tool and I'm rubbing this onto the front. I thought the Christmas tree green was perfect with the cover of this book. I burnished it down with the backing paper, but I'm also going to go over it lightly with my finger sander in two directions. This just ensures that it sits down in any little crevices and that sort of thing, so it looks like it's always been there. Now, this rub-on transfer is from Prima, I believe. It was just a scrap that I had left over, and so I'm going to cover up the title of the book on the binding. Same thing here. I'm going to burnish it down with the backing paper and then lightly sand it with my finger sander. This book is beautiful already, but we're going to add just a little bit more. So this is a little tag that I got. I believe it was a mini ornament from Walmart. I got it on clearance last year, but it's a little too white. So I'm using some dark wax, and I'm just going to keep rubbing it onto that tag until I get the shade that I'm looking for. I'm using a variety of ribbon to tie around the top of the book. Here, this piece was actually the perfect length, so I'm just measuring my other pieces by that one. I am cutting each one just a tad bit smaller than the one before. This just kind of ensures that you'll be able to see those edges and they'll look nicer not being all the same length. So I stacked them up and just simply tied a simple knot on top. And now I'm going to add that little tag to the knot of the bow, and then this book stack is ready to be displayed in your home.
Making our Christmas memories. I've been working so much lately, I can barely find the time to sleep. Yeah, I spend my time running around, keeping.
For project number two, I'm using some of these thrifted ceramic ornaments that I got a couple of years ago. I'm also using IOD's paint inlay. It's the Delft Traditions in Azure. And I gave my ornaments a coat of chalk paint. I let it dry, and then I gave it another coat of chalk paint, and while that chalk paint is still wet, I'm adding on the paint inlay. Now, I did spritz each one of these paint inlays right before I laid them down on top of the wet paint. I'm just using this little sponge dauber to make sure that I push it down without smearing it. Now I'll repeat the same thing for the other two ornaments. Once all three ornaments are complete, I'm going to set them aside and let them dry completely. And you can tell here the blue is not quite as bright once it dries. But once it is completely dry, you're going to spritz it again with a little bit of water, let it sit about 30 seconds, and then pull back the paper. And this is absolutely magical. I love the paint inlays. Of course, these will need to be sealed, and it is recommended to use a spray sealer first before you use any other type of sealer over it so that you don't smear the paint. So I took mine outside and I gave them a spritz of clear spray paint, and then I brought them back inside, and once they were completely dry, I gave them a coat of triple thick just to add some shine back to it. One thing I failed to record was using a gold paint pen to highlight the edges of the ornaments as well as the raised parts.
Making our Christmas memories. I've been working so much lately, I can barely find the time to sleep. Yeah, I spend my time running around, keeping.
For project number 3, I'm going to be making some gingerbread men. I'm using this corduroy skirt that I thrifted a couple of years ago. I had already used it for another project as well. I printed out a template to make a pattern, and I cut 2 pieces of both the corduroy skirt and then this sweater that was a sweater I wasn't wearing anymore. And I'm going to just trace around that and cut out the pattern, 2 pieces in each fabric. I'm also going to cut out a heart from each fabric. You could sew this on your sewing machine, you could use hot glue, but I chose to do a hand stitch all the way around each of the gingerbread men in opposite colors. So around this one I used the cream colored thread, and around the other one I used the darker brown colored thread. Now for this I was using a yarn needle. You really need something sharper than that. At least for the corduroy it worked fine on the sweater fabric. But for this I'm just doing a simple stitch around the edges. Once I got about 3/4 of the way around in my stitching, I did use some polyfill to stuff each one of these, and I'm just showing here as I am closing it up. I used one of the seams from the corduroy to make a scarf for the white gingerbread, and then I used part of the cuff from the sweater to make a scarf for the dark colored gingerbread. I'm just going to cut those to size, and I'm going to hot glue those in place. I'm also going to hot glue a button onto the scarf and the heart onto the body. Before I glue on the button, I decided to make some little tags. These are little cedar chips that I got somewhere, I don't even know where. And on one, I stamped the word sugar, and on the other one, I stamped the word spice. I'm going to punch a hole into these, and I will attach these to the scarf as well. These little gingerbread men are probably my favorite DIY from today's video. Let me know what you think down in the comments.
I've been working so much lately, I can barely find the time to sleep. Yeah, I spend my time running around, keeping.
For this project, I'm going to be making a stocking. I used one of these quilt squares from Walmart that I had in my stash. This is just a thin fabric. I did spritz it with some water and ironed it out a bit so that it would be nice and smooth. And then I cut out a pattern that I printed from my computer. You will need 2 of these pieces. So I folded my fabric in half and pinned my pattern down to the fabric and then cut it out. And I did leave mine longer at the top because I wasn't sure how long I wanted my stocking. You could hot glue this together. I chose to stitch mine, so I'm turning it inside out. I just didn't film that because me and my sewing machine have a love-hate relationship. So I did stitch around it and she behaved very well this time. Now I'm trying to decide which cuff I want at the top. And I ended up going with this red fabric. It's kind of a velvety fabric that I got from Dollar Tree. And now I'm taking this little stamp that I got from Tuesday morning when they were open, and it's a wreath. It's not a Christmas wreath, but I figured it would work for this. So I put down a piece of cardboard into the stocking so that the ink wouldn't bleed through, and then I used some charcoal gray ink to ink up the stamp and place it onto my stocking. I did not use a mount for this, but I should have because I did not press evenly, and the lower left part of the wreath did not come out very well, and I tried to doctor it up and that didn't make it much better, but it was okay. I felt like I needed to tie in the red just a little bit, so I took a thin brush and some red paint and I just went around and made some of those berries red, and then I'm going to go back with some green paint and add just a tad bit of green here and there. For the cuff, I am going to be hot gluing it to the top. So I cut my fabric the way that I wanted it. I'm going to make a seam at the top and the bottom using hot glue. Now that the hot glue is cooled, I'm going to add more hot glue to the top of the stocking and add that cuff. I needed a way to hang this stocking, so I used a piece of velvet ribbon that I had left from Christmas last year. I glued that in this little shape and glued it inside the stocking, and now I can add some lovely things inside and hang it.
Making our Christmas memories. I've been working so much lately, I can barely find the time to sleep. Yeah, I spend my time running around, making our Christmas memories. I've been working so much lately, I can barely find the
This project is very simple. I went to graphicsfairy.com and I printed off these vintage Christmas postcards. I'm cutting them out of my paper and then I'm going to glue them onto this cardstock. The cardstock would not go through my printer, so that's why I'm doing this. If you have a printer that will not eat up or get jammed on that cardstock, then you can skip this step. Once I have them glued down to the cardstock, I just cut them out, and then I'm going to be using this little stamp you see in the top right corner there to round off the corners of these postcards. This just makes it look a little bit more realistic and less hand cut. A simple and inexpensive way to wrap your Christmas presents is using butcher paper. This is actually freezer paper, but it's what I had on hand. So I'm going to wrap up this box and I'm going to add the postcard to the front. I'm using some of this red and white baker's twine to tie around the package and then tie a bow to the front, and this makes for a nice little vintage gift giving idea. For the smaller postcard, I decided to use this pretty box that I already had, and I'm just going to be wrapping around some jute twine, and it's a funny shape, so I'm going to wrap it around several times so that it will stay, and then I will just add that small postcard to the top. This is also the perfect place to add a little sprig of greenery or pine cones.
Making our Christmas memories. I've been working so much lately, I can barely find the time to sleep. Yeah, I spend my time running around.
Thanks again to Krista and Brenda for hosting today's playlist. Please find their channels in the description box below and don't forget to check out that playlist. Here's another video right here that I think you might like. Thanks so much for watching. Remember to share the chic. Bye now.